3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Hello, everybody. Yes, thank you. Oh, it's a standing ovation. So kind of everyone. No, you don't need to do that. Please sit down. No, okay, yes, good. Everything's starting to die down. And oh my goodness, this is the one where you have another ovation in a second wave, another standing ovation. It's so kind. I deserve this. You're right, I deserve this. So thank you to everybody. Please calm down. Take a seat. Make sure that you are a responsible distance from one another. Get 6 feet, a couple seats between you and the one that you love, and make sure that you are socially distant and staying safe and healthy. Welcome to Life on the Water. I'm Matt. I'm the pastor of Living Water Lutheran Church in Stevensville, Maryland. And I'm joined by
Mary, his wife and co-host, because I'm the only other adult present during this era of social distancing.
Yep, can't get close to anybody else.
Yeah. I'm not the co-host you wanted. I'm just the co-host who was here.
Not the co-host you want, the co-host you need, right?
There you go. That's a kinder interpretation.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So here we are, a podcast, because we can't get together on Sunday mornings. So we're going to have a podcast throughout the week called Life on the Water. And my hope is that even as we're able to, as things calm down, we're able to get out of our house, we're able to go back to restaurants and bars and re-socialize, if we haven't forgotten how to do that, right? Relearn how to do it.
Significant danger.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a significant danger of forgetting how to converse with
hermits.
Yes, converse with our fellow human being, and we'll just be resorting to grunts like Tim Allen on Home Improvement. But hopefully, as we emerge, the podcast will still remain as Life on the Water, and we'll be around to talk about interesting things. I don't know, the news, spirituality, Christianity, Bible stuff. I don't know. We'll see. We'll live into it. So, this is an exciting time with a lot of unknowns for everyone. This is one of them. And so we're going to try this podcast and see where it takes us. So we're going to set sails and let the Spirit start to blow us in whatever direction we're going to go. Yeah. So how is life on the water? How has your job been affected? We know how mine's been affected. What about you?
It's the same effect. Yes, I moving all of my classes online, moving advising online, moving teaching life, program life, faculty meeting life, all online. I feel like we as a nation have all collectively learned a lot of new technology and terminology in the last week that we didn't know before. So now you hear people like just throwing, we should have a Zoom meeting into conversation in a way that, like, had you heard of Zoom before this? I had not.
I have not. No, I didn't know what it is.
And now everybody is apparently on Zoom all the time. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I also have an adjunct who doesn't know how to use a computer. So I'm concerned about his class online.
So that might be a problem.
Some might think so. I mean, in his defense, when I hired him, I did not require him to use a computer because he's a wonderful expert in his field, but not so great with computers. Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks and months, as they say.
We all got to figure out how we're going to live like this.
Yeah.
In a time when we can't. What is it? Started as don't meet in groups larger than 50.
Yeah.
Don't meet in groups larger than 25. Don't meet in groups larger than 10. To stay in your homes.
And pretty soon, stay in your room.
Yeah, stay in your room. Shelter in place. You can't do anything. So we have been thinking about how to do this and how to promote it. And I mean, we've messed around with some promos. And I wanted to have you guys listen to one. We weren't really sure if we should go ahead with it, but we'll give you a sneak peek into what our life has been like the past couple of days, trying to figure out this podcast thing.
Introducing Pastor Matthew Beers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Living Water Podcast, where you can get all your hip-hop spiritual resources here. We are church, online.
Here I am with my lovely co-host and my wife, Mary Owen. Do you have anything to say? I'm so glad you're joining us today. Woo! Hip-hop spirituality today. Church Online.
You wanted to hear what it sounded like when I talked, too. Yeah. I'm embarrassed by you. I want you to know that. I'm thankful that this is not actually going out to the public right now.
Well, I got bad news for you because this is going out online. So join us here every week for Church Online, where we'll get together and we'll talk about something cool, hip, hop, hibbity hop, relevant for your life. Every week, Living Water Lutheran Church, Church Online.
So, what do you think? Is that something you would listen to?
No, I stand by it. That was embarrassing. No. What is that?
I thought it was cool. I thought it was hip. I thought people
Yeah.
would
You
love to
s-
tune into that.
You sound like you're trying to be hip and you're not sure how.
Oh. Well, it's probably true.
On the other hand, people do need a laugh in these crazy coronavirus days, so maybe. But they'll be laughing at you.
Oh, thank you. I hate it when people laugh with me. It's very annoying. So
Yeah.
as long as they're laughing at me, that's good.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so let's talk about what we're here to talk about. Right? And that is Sunday mornings. So we can't get together. And we had the greatest, best, most brilliant sermon series planned out between now and Easter about Jesus's parables. Right? So
Yeah.
we went through a few of them, and we had a couple ahead of us leading into Easter. And we're not going to be able to cover those. But we will try and do that here on the podcast and get to those a little bit. So one that we had planned to get to this week was the kingdom of God is like fill in the blank. So Jesus would go around and he would tell people, hey, the kingdom of God is like a lost coin. Right? We know that one? Sounds familiar?
Sounds
Maybe
vaguely
not?
familiar. I was going straight for yeast and mustard seed, but not lost coin.
Yeah, the kingdom of God is like a woman who puts yeast in flour and it needs the flour and lets it sit for a little bit, and next thing you know, it rises. You know, what does that mean? I mean, come on. Or the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed, where it's the smallest seed of all, right? And then it gets planted in a field, and next thing you know, it's the biggest tree in the field, takes over the whole thing. I mean, what does that even mean, right? So,
Is it that it's the smallest and it becomes big, or is it that it becomes ubiquitous? Like
well, I mean, if you want to use those fancy words, you should probably go to some sort of academic podcast. But if you mean that it's everywhere, well, I think that's the case. When I was in seminary, I had a professor for our New Testament studies, Dr. Mark Vitalis Huffman, he was. And so I'm going to try
Sounds fancy.
It does. It's very fancy. 2 last names like that. I mean, you have to earn those.
It's an extra level of fancy.
No one is just born with 2 names. You have to.
Yes, they are.
Well, they're born with 2
Many
names.
cultures of the world, that's true.
They're born. How many are born with 2 last names, though?
Like
Is
in
that
almost
also?
all of the Latino countries,
Really?
like the
Interesting.
entire, like most of the Western Hemisphere.
Well, then what's wrong with us?
Well, we're just behind the times, apparently. We only gave our daughter your name. I might
Yeah.
protest.
So, well, this guy had 2 last names,
Okay,
so I
fair
guess he's
enough.
ahead of
All
the curve, or
Yeah.
more enlightened, and what would you like to say? More cultured than we are? I don't know. Either way, all I want to say is this. Whatever I'm about to say, if I get it wrong, we'll just blame him,
Oh.
right? Because this is what I learned in his classes.
I thought that disclaimer was going to go the other way.
No,
like,
no.
he's not to blame for whatever.
No,
No,
he is most certainly to blame for everything that I'm about to say.
Oh,
right?
dear.
Yeah, well, he did endorse me for my ordination.
well,
he was there.
That's different. It's not just that he taught you the
So,
class.
I mean,
He
yes.
okay,
Mhm.
all right. I can see that.
and therefore, I think he endorses everything I say
Sure.
from that point on.
Yeah, sounds reasonable.
He takes on the responsibilities. You sponsor it, you own it, right?
Yeah.
You gotta You got to step up and anyway. So
I shudder to think how much this makes me responsible for you.
in what way?
Well, I mean, I married you. Do I
Right.
then have to take some responsibility for all the random things you put out into the universe?
Yes, mhm.
Oh dear,
Yeah,
that's
for all
sobering.
yeah. 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 Well, who else is going to be responsible for what I do and say? Me? That's crazy.
Apparently not. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's not the American way. Are you kidding me? So anyway, we have the parable of the mustard seed, and the mustard seed gets planted, and it's the biggest seed. Well, we know one.
It's the biggest seed. It's the smallest.
It's the
seed.
smallest seed and the biggest plant, right?
Right. Okay.
So we know that the mustard seed is not the smallest seed. So I hear. I mean, I'm no biologist or whoever studies seeds, but yeah, the mustard seed is not the smallest seed. Or so I hear. There are much smaller seeds, is what I'm saying. But it's a very small seed. And it's still very small. And it most certainly is not the biggest plant. So if you plant a mustard seed, and then it grows, it doesn't become the biggest tree. Because you have very big trees. Like, if you planted a seed in Washington, which I don't recommend going to today, either D.C. or the state.
Right.
But if you went up there, or is it California? Either way, don't go to any of these places.
Both. All of the above.
Sequoias?
Don't go anywhere. You're social distancing. Stay at home.
Don't they? Where do they have the sequoias? Is that Washington or is that in?
Yeah, that's
California.
I mean, that's. I feel like in Oregon too, and
Oh, okay. So the West Coast.
West Coast.
So if you took a mustard seed and you planted it beside one of those trees that you could drive a car through, right? Didn't you ever see that picture?
Yes. Yes.
The sequoia thing has got the little
Right. The window.
It's an arch,
yeah,
and
there's
then
an
people
arch.
can drive your car through it.
Yeah.
If you put a mustard seed in the ground right beside that, are you saying that it's going to grow up to be bigger than that sequoia tree?
I would not say that.
Right, and therefore that means the entire Bible is wrong. We should just throw it in the trash, right?
That must be it. This is what your professor in seminary taught you.
So it's not the biggest tree in the
Okay,
world, right?
right.
So there must be something else going on there, right? Well, what is it? What exactly is happening? Yeah. Well,
Sure.
there's another version of the mustard seed parable that Jesus talks about. And this, I think, is in Luke. Well, it's in one of the 4 Gospels. I guarantee you that. Luke.
This is why we pay him the big bucks.
It says, I know that it's in the Bible. I'll
It's
tell you
in
that.
the Bible. All right.
Jesus. Parable of the mustard seed. Luke. Jesus is teaching his disciples that the kingdom of God is like a fella who has a field. And one of his enemies sneaks in the middle of the night, right after this guy put all of his, right after he planted all the good foods, right? Like, I don't know, beans, tomatoes, wheat, probably wheat, because that's what's mentioned in the story. So he plants all his wheat. He's sleeping at night, and he's thinking, it's going to be great, you know, a wonderful forecast for a lot of rain. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to have all this wheat. Well, what he doesn't know is while he's sleeping, his enemy, who must really have a beef with this guy, I have no idea what he did. I have no idea. He probably, I don't know, dinged his car in a parking lot. I mean, he's like that type of angry. And so he plants the mustard seed in this guy's field. A couple days go by, and next thing you know, there's wheat coming up, but there's also all this mustard coming up. And it's starting to strangle out the wheat. And so the people who work at the field are wondering, well, what should we do? So they go to the boss, and they ask him, you want us to pull out these weeds? And the guy says, no, if you pull them out, you'll pull out the good wheat too, so let's let them grow together. And then at the end of the year, when it's time to harvest, we'll do our best to separate the two. We'll burn up all the mustard seed. We'll keep all the wheat. And we'll have, whatever we can. So the thing is...
Pretzels with mustard?
Pretzels with... yes. Instead of burning the mustard seed, you could make mustard.
We can make the ultimate snack.
Yes. maybe that's the point of it all. Yeah.
You've just missed it all these years.
Yeah, when we think about it, it destroys the weeds. We think about some people go here, some people go there, right? Maybe it's the idea of grinding the weeds into a nice mustard and getting what's good out of it, right? And then putting that on the pretzels, which are good with or without the mustard. They're just very good. And then clearly, that story is about universal salvation. Clearly.
Yeah.
Yep. And somewhere, if some theologian is listening to this, is just, he's just sighed heavily, I guess. I don't know what theologians do when they're very upset. So the mustard seed, the mustard plant back then was a very pervasive plant. And if you...
Would you say it was an invasive plant?
What did I say? Pervasive?
I'm asking if it's both. Yeah, it's pervasive. It's everywhere, right?
Okay.
And invasive it's like aggressive and it grows in places where you don't want it to go.
Oh, okay. As you can tell, I don't really have the vocabulary to do a podcast. So it's pervasive and invasive, right? So if it gets in there, then it's very difficult to get rid of, right? So it gets everywhere. But there's also really no way to prevent the garden from getting a mustard seed or a mustard plant related infection, if you will, right? So the mustard seed will float around in the air and it might find its way in your garden. Now, of course, in the story that Jesus tells from Luke, there's an enemy who plants it, but that's not always the case, right? Sometimes people do everything right, and you have this their field, and it's planted with wheat and everything. They have all these plants, everything's great, and a little bit of mustard seed gets in there, right? And if things don't go right, that mustard seed will take over that whole garden. So mustard seed back then it doesn't have a good reputation, right? So when people hear Jesus say, you know what? The kingdom of God is like, well, let's start with yeast. The kingdom of God is like yeast, right? You knead it into the dough, it gets everywhere, it rises up, right? That's how Jesus sounded a lot like Al Pacino in my mind. You knead it in the dough, it rises up, and it gets everywhere, right? It's if it's in a little bit of the dough, it's in the whole thing, right? It just rises up. So and if you put yeast in bread or dough and you knead it around and then you sit it on the counter in a warm place and it puffs up, well, good luck getting all the yeast out of it, right?
Yeah, it's just everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's what the kingdom of God is like. And people back then probably like, you know what?
Sure.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Like, who doesn't like a nice crusty loaf of bread? That's,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
okay, sure.
I
yeah.
like bread.
Good.
Bread's good. This
Puffiness
man,
is good. Like
yes,
fluffy bread.
Fluffy bread, which was a luxury back then, right?
Yeah.
You used to have to cook your
Otherwise, it's flat pita bread, right?
yeah, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is what people ate
Right?
most of the time. They
Yeah.
would
We
just-
didn't do a lot of research on this
Yeah.
point.
Oh, there's my phone. Somebody's calling me. We'll just go ahead and silent that, right? So anyway, what were we talking about?
Puffy yeast.
Oh, puffy yeast. Yeah, right. So, see, I was reading somewhere in a magazine called Biblical Archaeology, and they were looking
You
at
sound
this.
so cultured.
I know, thank you. Right, I don't have the vocabulary, but at least I can make things up that I've read somewhere, or at least repeat them.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Roman city. Archaeologists digging up ovens, and they noticed, the studying somehow. They were studying these ovens somehow, and trying to figure out what people used them for. And so they discovered that they used them for bread, but a specific type of bread. Like they were sort of.
What else were they thinking people used them for?
I don't know. What do you use an oven for? Roast chicken, right?
But I mean, did it need to be more specific beyond like food preparation?
Oh yeah. Like what type of food? Like what
I
was the
see, I
diet,
see.
right?
Okay, all right.
Like archaeologists will go and they'll dig up an ancient garbage pit to tell what people ate. They did that in Jerusalem.
Okay, so they were trying to use the ovens to determine what the diet was.
So they're very familiar with garbage pits, right, and landfills,
Right.
and finding them. And then they found all of these ovens, and they thought, wow, this is great. We can look at these and study them and try and figure out what it was that people were baking, right? So their conclusion was that these ovens were ancient bakeries that the more wealthy members of society used, and they would bake bread with yeast in it, because most of the people only had porridge or some sort of grain or cereal, right? So if you were 80% of the population, you ate oatmeal. Every meal, just slop, right?
You love oatmeal.
I do. Yep.
Okay, all right. I'm just
Prepared in all
saying, you
sorts
just
of
called
ways.
it slop, but it's also your go-to favorite breakfast food.
It is.
So.
It's a great food. Yeah, especially if you put chocolate in it
Yeah,
and peanut butter
Yeah.
and sugar, and it tastes just like a no-bake cookie.
Yeah,
But I don't think they had that back then.
right.
Did they even have sugar? They just eat.
We are
porridge.
far outside of anything I can speak to here. I also think we're far outside your point. Can you,
No, I don't think we are. I don't think we are.
Where are we in this?
I don't think we are, because think of
Okay,
it,
all right.
right?
Bring it all back. Bring it home.
Who used those ovens? The servants of wealthy people.
Right,
And
yeah.
the wealthy people wanted good, fluffy bread. So when
Okay.
you say the kingdom of God is like yeast that makes a good, fluffy bread, you're telling people that if you are a citizen of God's kingdom, you get a really good meal, right? What would it be like? It would be like saying, hey, the kingdom of God is like surf and turf, right? I don't know.
Is that your go-to
What do-
fancy meal?
Yeah, what do fancy people eat? Because I don't know.
You are not fancy. That's
I'm
true.
not.
You're very not fancy.
But whatever it is that people go out and, the Rockefellers of today, whatever they eat, the kingdom of God is like a Michelin restaurant. Something like that.
Yeah,
It's like,
okay.
wow, we're going to go eat at a Michelin restaurant? Because I don't think I've ever eaten at a Michelin restaurant. Right?
Yes, it's exciting. Yeah.
Because things cost as much of an Oldsmobile.
Yeah.
I don't own an Oldsmobile to sell to afford whatever it is that they're serving at the Michelin restaurant. So I've never eaten there.
And let's face it, you probably wouldn't like it anyway.
Probably not.
All right,
I doubt
all right,
they.
so the
I doubt they serve oatmeal.
So the yeast thing means that it's a really positive association. Everyone's really excited.
Very positive, right?
Yeah.
So, so he's throwing out something to the people that they love. They're eating it up, right? And then he comes here with the, he's coming with the uppercut of saying, you know what the kingdom of God is like, and people are like, yeah, man, tell us something else. Is it like filet mignon? What is it? It's like a mustard seed. And all of the oxygen is sucked out of the room because of people gasping in horror. What are you saying? It's like a mustard seed? This guy's off his rocker. Jesus talks like Al Pacino. Always talks from a rocker. So he's speaking from a rocker. So when they say Jesus is off his rocker,
It's because he's fallen off his
it's
rocker.
because he's actually fallen off his rocker.
Yeah.
So when Jesus says, the kingdom of God is like mustard seed, everybody gasps. The oxygen comes out of the room.
And he
Jesus faints and falls out of his rocker, and some guy from the back is like, Jesus is off his rocker. And indeed
It's a
he
very
was.
vivid mental image. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this
It
is
really
the-
brings the story home.
This is life in the ancient world.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, Jesus was being provocative, right? Is that right? Is that
Yeah.
a word? Is that a good?
There's a word that's used correctly. Yeah.
Ah, yes. Thank you. And if we were today, if Jesus was here today, we wonder what are some of the analogies that he would use to help us understand the kingdom of God? Well, he might say the kingdom of God is like a Michelin restaurant. Everybody gets to eat there and have the best meal of their life. Oh, and the kingdom of God, it's like a virus.
See, I gasped for you. Like a coronavirus?
Like a coronavirus. I think a lot of
What?
people, yeah. No, go ahead.
I mean, it
Let's
seems
stutter
like,
together for a while. Go, 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 go. Anyway.
but like that's like, how can you associate something as good as the kingdom of God with something as clearly horrifically awful as the novel coronavirus of Wuhan?
So think about the mustard seed, right?
Yeah.
It's invasive.
Yeah.
It's pervasive.
Indeed.
It can be, well, I was going to say it could be planted by an enemy, but I don't want to get into that type of conspiracy theory.
Theories, oh no.
Yeah, but it's invasive, it's pervasive, and the idea is if it gets into your garden, there's a real threat that it is going to get everywhere.
It's transformative.
It's transformative. Thank you. It's going to take over everything. So the yeast and the mustard seed, they don't have much in common as far as desirability, but they have this in common, that once it gets into something, it's very hard to get out, almost impossible to get out. And the kingdom of God, once it's introduced to the culture, to the society, is like yeast or a mustard seed. It invades it, it's pervasive, and you can't get rid of it. When he talks about yeast and bread, that's something people are going to eat up. People are going to eat that up, right? They're going to love it. And so that's very reassuring to the folks that are sitting right in front of them. But so is also the parable of the mustard seed. It's reassuring to the people who are sitting right in front of them, but it's a threat to those trying to keep the kingdom of God at bay as much as possible, the powers that be, at least in the ancient world. So the kingdom of God is at once a comforting thing, and on the other hand, it's a very threatening thing, right? And so today, the kingdom of God is like a Michelin restaurant. Delicious food everyone's going to eat.
I'm not convinced that analogy works, but okay.
Oh, we can find something else.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll edit it in. We'll just have a
dead air.
Yes, we'll just say the Michelin restaurant is like a lobster tail or whatever we
But
say.
I just think the bread analogy works for all time. Like, still, nice fluffy bread still works.
I don't know, bread or meat? Which one would you rather? Well,
Like a nice, handcrafted sourdough.
yeah, I mean it's okay, but people like their meat.
People do like their meat. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have that like it's everywhere, it grows.
All right, so let's
say
say here, kingdom of God is like yeast that gets into your favorite bread, like a sticky bun. The kingdom of God is like yeast
Cinnabon.
put into a Cinnabon, dipped in your favorite liquefied sugar,
Or frosting.
eaten in one bite,
There you go.
if it even takes that long.
Right, yeah.
So that's one way, and that's very comforting to people. Everybody can get on board with that. But the kingdom of God is like a virus. Well, then, when you hear that, there's something in us, in our gut, that says, well, that's wrong. That's a terrible thing to say. That's vile. That doesn't speak well of the kingdom of God. But I think if that feeling that you have in your gut when you hear me say that, the kingdom of God is like a virus, would be the same feeling that folks way back then would have felt when they heard the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. It makes people stop and think, what on earth are you saying? You're off your rocker, JC, which was his nickname. That was actually his DJ name, DJ JC. DJ squared C? But anyway, DJ JC. When he would go out and he'd rap his parables, people would be shocked to hear the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. So think about that, right?
You're lucky we don't burn heretics anymore.
Yeah, that's good.
Sorry, you lost your train of thought. So okay, so it's like a mustard seed. It's like a virus.
Yes. But you get the idea, right? It spreads easily. It's hard to get out of society once it's introduced, and you really have to take extreme measures if you want to extract it. But you never really get rid of it. We will always carry it within ourselves in some form.
And that's good news.
And that's good news, oddly enough.
For as hard as it is to fight coronavirus, that's as present as the kingdom of God is with us now.
Yes. Well, there you have it. That's our first podcast. I don't think that went too bad.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it
You were
went all
only
right.
kind of embarrassing.
Only a little embarrassing. That's good. But nothing that some pretzels and mustard can't resolve tonight
So
over a
lots
movie.
now.
Yeah. I'm going to go watch Contagion tonight, I think,
Yeah.
and catch up on those types of movies. But this was fun. I think we'll do it again next week.
Indeed, we will.
So subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. Remember, it's free. And we will see you again next week. So I'm Matt.
I'm Mary.
And this was Life on the Water.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.